and welcome back to my third installment in Finding Love Again After Loss. In my previous Facebook Lives, I talked about three types of women and the barriers they have to finding love again. The first kind of woman is the controller, and she comes from a background, by the way, all of these people come from a background of emotional stress, and they have particular reasons and personal reasons that cause them to behave the way they do. And there's no judgment. This is actually a survival pattern. Anyway, the controller has come from an environment which is unsafe. Either there is not the basic survival needs that are required for health, such as warmth and food and clothing, or it's an abusive environment. So in either case, it's unsafe. And the child picks the controlling pattern to create some sort of certainty in their lives. They may even take over and take care of their siblings or protect their siblings to create some sort of normalcy. They take over responsibilities of their adult parent so that they can remain safe. The second pattern is the pleaser. This is not quite as chaotic. In fact, it's usually not a chaotic environment, but where there may be a loss of a parent or abandonment of a parent, or it could be simply disconnection or emotional abandonment, workaholic father, an emotionally shut down mother. The child, the daughter, becomes a people pleaser to get the attention and the love she needs. She's got the physical food, clothing, warmth, but human beings are social beings and they actually need that love as well. Both these patterns, the person, the woman finds a way, the child finds a way to influence the world out there to give her what she needs, either safety or approval, or maybe a little of both. The third pattern is the depressive shutdown pattern. And this pattern, the woman has given up trying to influence the universe and has resorted to self-soothing patterns to mitigate the pain that comes with feeling unworthy, unsafe, unacceptable. This is a child who has been subjected to chronic stress. The pattern may be learned from a parent who is also depressive, and so it could be modeling, or simply the child is in a situation where nothing she does makes any difference, and she feels chronically worthless. It's a little bit like what happened to Cinderella in the story where the wicked stepmother comes in with her two daughters and subjugates Cinderella. Now, Cinderella did have the early history in which she was actually loved by her father for a period of time. And having that in her early childhood gave her some resources that enabled her to handle that. If this child we're talking about has never had that, it has been chronic stress from the start, the pattern can be very deeply ingrained. And that pattern of self-soothing through drinking, drugs, or eating, it adds to the problem because it usually, those kinds of behaviors affect the health. That person often becomes overweight, may develop diabetes, they don't get out of the house because they're overweight, and actually rob themselves of the opportunity of stimulating the chemicals in their body that would make them feel better. Psychologists did a study with rats, and they coupled a shock with the sound of a bell. In some cases, the rat was able to escape by climbing over a barrier. And in other cases, the rat was not able to escape. The interesting thing is that the rat that was able to escape showed no adverse results or consequences to being subjected to shock as long as it was able to escape, like our first two patterns. The third rat, however, eventually just hunkered down and just shook and wouldn't do anything. And even when the bell sounded and there was no longer shock, the rat responded in the same way because it had become conditioned to the bell. This is the problem for the depressive, is that the physiology of depression is powerful and it can become a vicious cycle. It produces negative ideation, where thoughts trigger depression, depression triggers the negative thoughts, and it goes over and over again. So there are two kinds of depression. There's one which I call constitutional or chronic, and this is a child who has suffered this depression since childhood, either through learning or through an untenable situation at home where they were never able to escape, or contextual, which is that something significant happened in your life that triggered depression. This happened in my own life. When I was a young adult, I got my first teaching job at a small Midwestern college. And you may remember from my other Facebook Lives, I was a people pleaser. And I used this method to obtain success in this new job, only it didn't work. And I was given notice that I would only have one more year to work there, but that my contract would not be renewed after that. And I was devastated because my people pleasing was my method of survival. And I didn't know what to do. And so I literally got depressed. I got sick. And this is the only time in my life I was ever depressed. I'm definitely a cup half full kind of person. But I was depressed and it felt like an illness. It invaded my body and I couldn't move and I couldn't change the thoughts. I did go to see a counselor. And he gave me some activities, but you know what actually got me out of it was eventually changing my circumstances. That's how you know that it's contextual. When you change the circumstances, do you get some release? Do you get some upliftment? There may be some guilt around that you should not be feeling uplifted. I had a man in one of my grief groups that he was actually suicidal after the loss of his wife. And eventually he found the solution in getting involved in a new relationship. And he did this very early on, which is not something I generally recommend. But the context changed and he actually felt a great deal of relief from that. Because depression is really, it is a physiological condition. It stimulates a whole bunch of chemicals in your body that can really make you feel horrible. And if you do not address it, it can become chronic because the mind is constantly developing new neural patterns to make sense of the world. And the body is programmed to create habits. And so depression can become a habit if you don't address the underlying contextual cause, if you don't work on the grief. So if this is your situation, there can be change provided that you can shift the chemistry, you can change your thinking, but mainly that you're motivated. Now, you cannot change either of those other two things if you are not motivated to change. I do not work with people who are not motivated to change. who are constantly sabotaging, who are constantly committed to feeling bad. When I first was running hospice partner law support groups, there were several women in there who had fallen into the pattern of the grieving widow. And they had been living that pattern for 2 years. And they were not interested in changing. They had formed an identity around that. And they left the group because I was inviting them to change. And they did not want to change. Depressives sometimes sabotage their therapists because they want to feel entitled to feeling bad and not doing anything. It can lead and will eventually lead to death. It certainly leads to ill health and misery. But you have a choice. You can change, especially if your depression is contextual, if it's the result of a significant loss. I did change my depression, and I have worked with women who, well, even men, who were feeling depressed and stuck, but were willing to do the work. You have to be willing to do the work and to open to changing, and it takes practice to change. If you are struggling with depression and want to bring love into your life, you are not going to bring love into your life or get the intimacy or the support or the encouragement or the conversation that you want if you don't change the depression. You may get care. There are men out there who like to play hero and might take care of you. But you will not change unless you choose to change. If you have the motivation, if you have the desire to change out of this pernicious pattern of misery and negative thoughts, give me a call. And I can tell you how I can work with you and how I can help you. And we can determine whether or not you have what it takes to change this pattern. There is a link in the comment section that tells you how to get in touch with me. Don't delay. Don't let this turn into a chronic condition. The chemistry of the body is powerful, and it can keep you stuck. And life is too short to hold back, to live in a place where you feel hopeless and helpless. Life can be beautiful, life can be wonderful. But when you take that mindset of only seeing things as negative, it's very hard to see the light. It's very hard to change. That's all for today. I hope this was helpful to you. Reach out if this is a match for you, or if you know somebody who might benefit from what I've been talking about, share this video with them. That's all for now. Be brilliant.